Hello and welcome to Eco Show. I'm Henry, and this is a show about happenings in ecology, the environment, and sometimes other random areas. I go through an animal of the week to start, and then we talk about some recent research to get our brains expanded, and then we wrap up the show with the news. So this week, our animal of the week is the tiger. And the tiger, 2 million years ago, separated from the other sort of cat thing that it was, became its own thing. It's the largest living cat species, and it likes to eat ungulates and wild boar. Young tigers will stay with their mother for 2 years until then, and then at that point they'll go and establish their own ranges. Some more information about the basics about tigers. They've got stripes, which you'll be familiar with, and they're particularly good for hiding in tall grass and shadows. So that orange color may also seem a bit confusing. It might seem obvious, but because prey has limited color vision, that may actually make them appear more shadowy and grass-like. And I think it's possibly why hunters use high-vis orange, because the high-vis orange can be seen by people but isn't seen as well by things that they're trying to hunt. We'll have to verify that. And their activity is that they are usually diurnal, which I always forget, which is ridiculous. I should know what that means, but when rubber hits the road, I forget. And it means happening in the day. Yeah. I just need to know it's not, I just have to remember it's not nocturnal. We all know what nocturnal is. Diurnal, so they're usually active in the day. So now we're talking about some tiger activities, what they do, how they do things. And they are actually pretty strong swimmers, and they don't usually climb. And they're super big, so it kind of makes sense. They've been known to swim up to 29 kilometers or 18 miles in a day. And they've been known to disperse over distances of 650 kilometers, which is 400 miles, in order to reach other populations. So they may be traveling for mating or food or things like that. And they don't tend to cross over deforested areas, which are more than 10 kilometers wide. Their home range is pretty dependent on their environment, but it can be from as small as 19 square kilometers or 17 square miles in mountainous areas, or up to 4,000 square kilometers, which is 1,500 square miles in open areas. So if they've got food, then depending on how wide open the area is, they'll be pretty content going wherever. For the type of species of tiger, there's sort of some debate about how many species there are. The main consensus is that there's two subspecies that are basically mainland ones and ones that are in islands. So the range of tigers is from eastern Turkey all the way through Siberia and northern China. And there's also tigers in Indonesia, on Indonesian islands. And so the idea at the moment is that there's just mainland and then the ones on the islands. But there's also a lot of people that advocate for a greater separation in the types of tigers. And so those mainland tigers, there's the Bengal tiger, Caspian, Siberian, South China, Indochina, and Malayan tigers. So those would all be under that sort of mainland tiger type. And then on the islands, there's the Javan, Bali, and Sumatran tigers. So a bit of debate about that. They've had this huge range, like we just mentioned, that was from eastern Turkey all the way to northeastern China. And this was where they're hanging out doing their thing, which is why they're so well documented and a part of so many different cultures. So this is a massive range, but they've lost 93% of that historic range since the early 20th century, with large scale deforestation and urbanization and things like that going on. And particularly habitat fragmentation is really a big issue because, like we mentioned, the tigers don't like to cross large areas of unforested habitat, but when they do, they're more exposed to humans, more exposed to all sorts of different things. And when you have more fragmented habitat, it means you have oftentimes more area of habitat that's in contact with human-dominated landscapes. And those are going to be places that aren't safe for tigers because they're going to go in, they're going to go after people's livestock and things like that, and they're going to be seen as a pest. So they've lost a huge amount of their range. And the only places now where they are really in the wild is Siberia, India, Southeast Asia, and Sumatra. And their wild population is estimated at 3,000 individuals. And India is estimated to have the largest wild population of tigers at the moment. So that big loss of habitat happened in the early 20th century, which is the 1900s. But it's important to note that a big issue in their population decline happened over the period from, particularly over this period, I'm not sure the exact total period when the British were ruling, colonizing India, but of particular note is the period from 1875 to 1925, over which the British killed 80,000 tigers as sport. So it was sport for them to kill tigers. King George alone in a 1911 visit to India killed 39 tigers in 10 days. So they would go out there and just shoot tigers basically for fun. And let's see, what else have we got? They have conservation for tigers has been designed by understanding what their home range needs are and designing areas or protecting areas for them as needed. One of the big ongoing issues for tigers is poaching, which continues to be an issue because their pelts can be highly prized and they are used in traditional medicine. Let's see, there's also an estimate, I didn't know about this, that there's estimated to be kind of secretly 5 to 10,000 captive bred tigers, which are in particular in China, and these are used for different traditional medicines and things there, but it's not very well documented. And that estimate of 5 to 10,000 was from the early 2000s, and I didn't see updates to what those estimates may be now. Let's see, what else have we got about them? I've got a big map they'll put up there, hopefully, about their ranges. And India's had success in reducing these losses of tigers by focusing on combating poachers. And okay, and so the last sort of thing is that in order to understand the existence and the ongoing presence of populations in the wild, it has been the way that people keep track of that is by doing photography, so camera traps, which is where you set out a camera and it'll be triggered by movement, and that gives people an understanding of where tigers are and how many are moving around and about in the wild. So that's all we've got for tigers at the moment, and now we're moving to our research section. And as always, I'll often explain the research poorly, so if it doesn't make sense, it's probably my fault. But I think this is a pretty easy one today. And I'm not going to read the title because it gives away the whole article, but it's by Sinai Yitbarek et al. And let's see, I think this was in Ecological Applications, but I'm double checking right now. Yeah, so this is from the journal Ecological Applications, and we're talking about mosquitoes, which is a common theme in these videos because I'm usually getting eaten by mosquitoes. And mosquitoes, what they're exploring is the distributions of mosquitoes in cities. So we think about mosquitoes usually about them being annoying, and usually that they're from standing water and things like that. But I like this article because it explores some of the ecological and sociological implications of mosquito populations. So it bridges a whole different multiple levels of topics. And what they're exploring is how the ecologies of cities correlate with race, socioeconomics, and mosquito populations. So what does that mean? So we're talking about the ecology of cities, so the ecosystems within cities and the habitats that are within cities. So in general, cities are at the moment and tend to have been pretty mixed up or pretty divided by income levels. And in places like the US where redlining was common, which prevented black people in certain areas from being able to live in other neighborhoods, you also have a race aspect. So this article was looking at the interaction of race and income on distributions of mosquitoes and different habitat types for mosquitoes. So mosquitoes like garbage and they like standing water and things like that, and they tend to breed in abandoned buildings as well. So I'm gonna reel it back in. I've kind of gone a little random there. So this is what happens when I'm talking about the research article. I get excited and then I lose track of of the the thought process that I was meant to be relating. Okay. So cities are complex landscapes in particular because of inequalities. And what this looks like is that wealthy areas tend to have more green space, more open space, and you might initially think that that would be lead to there being more mosquitoes there, but these wealthy areas also tend to have more resources to combat mosquito populations and better education campaigns around getting rid of standing water and things like that. So these, although it may seem like more greenery equals more mosquitoes, that's not really true. And in poorer areas in cities, like I mentioned, there's more garbage, there's more abandoned buildings, and in those spaces there tends to be a bit of standing water, which in reality ends up being a better breeding area for mosquitoes. And this was a meta-analysis, so that means it was a study of studies. So they're looking at findings from different studies. And a good thing to note about that, and also what I thought was cool about this article, is that they documented how they did their meta study, how they searched. So even when you're typing into your different journal databases and you're looking for different research, they're documenting how they even, what keywords and things they typed in. So multiple levels, this was a cool study. And their findings were that from looking at multiple studies, their findings were that mosquito densities were higher in poor areas compared to high income areas. They also found socio-ecological covariates coincided with mosquito densities. So they're saying that where there was more garbage, trash, and plastic containers in cities, studies found that those also coincided with more mosquito populations. And so their sort of call to action is that it's important to direct efforts to control mosquito populations in poor areas, because the factors that are common in those poor areas, like garbage, abandoned buildings, and things like that, are correlated to mosquito populations. There was also something I was thinking, but is kind of blanking out of my mind about this. Oh, yeah. So, and one of the big issues with mosquitoes is that obviously they're a nuisance, but they carry many diseases. And that can compound issues in these lower income areas, because lower income areas tend to have worse connections and availability of healthcare services. So this is a big public health thing. So I didn't describe that as concisely or smoothly as I would have liked, but I hit all the major points. And basically the summary is that they did a meta-analysis, so they looked at a lot of different studies on mosquito populations, and they found that those mosquito populations were correlated with poor areas in cities, and that is a reason to put more funding into controlling mosquito populations in those areas. So the title of this was Urban Mosquito Distributions Are Modulated by Socioeconomic Status and Environmental Traits in the USA by Sinai Yitbarek et al. So sometimes I have to skip the title because it gives it all away too quickly. Okay, on to the news now. We have got a vision has been revealed to make the first U.S. bullet train. This will be from Las Vegas to California. It's expected to cost $10 billion, and it will be along 352 kilometers or 218 miles. It will be completely electric, save 3 million car trips, also save 400,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide, and it would be a 1-hour train ride. It is estimated to start in 2023 and to finish in 2027. So this is a big project. It'll be interesting to see if it actually happens, because there have been a few high-speed rail goal things in California before, and they haven't quite worked out. So hopefully this one does. And that would be saving a lot of traffic going between Las Vegas, and so I think I said Las Vegas to California, but in particular it's Las Vegas to Southern California. And this would lead to probably more people living in different areas. And if it's only a 1-hour train ride, I imagine there'd be a bit of people living in who would decide to live in Las Vegas because of lower different taxes or things like that, who then could commute to Southern California. So this may lead to an expansion of where people will be living. And it was a really short timeline. I was pretty amazed that they said they thought that it's going to start this year and be done by 2027. So we'll see if that actually does start up this year. That would be a pretty big thing for the U.S. because they don't have any bullet trains. And pretty cool. Interesting thing. Okay. Moving from Los Angeles to Bangladesh, we have a forest conservation bill over there, which is a big change for them. It's going to replace their Forest Act, which was from 1927 and a hangover from when they were colonized by the British. Bangladesh, for context, has the largest mangrove forest in the world. And the main thing that this bill is doing is changing the way that the government treats forests as a conservation issue rather than a money-making issue. The original act basically had it in writing that they needed to be managing their forests in a way that generated money. So this is changing things so that the forest is used in opens the door for it to be used in more of a conservation-based way. And they've noted that this doesn't mean that they don't want to change livelihoods of people who are living near the forest and who need products from it, but it is going to be making it easier to treat it less like just a thing to make money from. There's also a part of the bill that is going to change how you can cut trees even outside of conservation areas. So that will be kind of an interesting thing. They just mentioned that, so I'm not sure if it's a more complex process, but they're basically trying to make it more difficult to just cut down trees. And that, speaking of trees, so that's our news from Bangladesh. Speaking of trees, there is this thing called a liquid tree, and in particular this thing is called Liquid 3 bioreactor, and this is a alternative to trees in cities where there's a lot of pollution. So usually in cities there's a push now to grow more trees, to grow more greenery, but sometimes the soil in cities is too polluted to grow trees, and or the cities may be very water constrained, so planting trees wouldn't work for them to plant them there. And so there's experimentation using something called a liquid tree, and this one that we'll have a photo of is called Liquid 3 bioreactor, and it's being rolled out in Belgrade, Serbia. And the city has 2 coal power plants near it, and particle concentrations 4.9 times the guidelines for healthy areas. So this is a very polluted city, and this is part of the reason why they want to roll it out here. This thing is going to, and so let's see, one more note is that urban areas emit 75% of carbon dioxide, and this is due to transportation and heating and cooling. So this little unit, this Liquid 3 bioreactor, is apparently equal to 2 10-year-old trees, or 200 square meters of grass. And it's water with algae in it, and the algae is taken out every 45 days and used for fertilizer. So this little thing is, and it looks kind of groovy, like it's spooky, but it does look kind of cool. And apparently, so it's got a little solar panel on top. You can charge your phone at it. You can hang out around it. Hopefully, I just feel like people will be tempted to vandalize it, but it sounds like it's doing a pretty good bit of air cleaning. You want to see that sort of thing done in line with how do we switch energy to be a cleaner source. You don't want it to just be like, okay, we've made a tree now, because it's not, there's so many benefits from a tree that are beyond that. It's habitat for bugs, it's lots of different things. And so obviously it's not a tree. It's kind of dystopian, but it's also kind of cool if you don't have any other option. I would kind of want one in my house. Well, I mean, I don't have a house. I would want one in my living space, because I feel like that would be, you just have super fresh air. Okay. And let's see. And the last thing that we've got today is that there's a big solar array unveiled in China, and it is power enough to power 1.5 million homes. So that is pretty cool. Nice big solar solution for energy. And the last thing is that UK wind generated for electricity. Wow, I wrote that really backwards. UK wind generated for electricity, then gas for the first time in the UK. I have to translate what I wrote. What was I writing? UK wind. Okay, UK. I think. I think wind generated more electricity for the UK than gas did for the first time this past year. But I've written in verbal hieroglyphics, so it's a little bit hard to tell what I was trying to say. But yeah, that's about it. That's all we've got for this week. So we had tigers, we had mosquitoes, we had lots of different things going on today. So I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.